Why is the modern world so stressful for so many people?
Oh gosh, there's so many things. Like, I believe that our brains are put under so much tension at the moment. So we can include factors like nutrition in the role. There is so much processed foods. There is a lot of difficulties to interpreting the nutritional interventions and the nutritional standards that we're supposed to be feeding our brains. We lack exercise, which is one of the main things to feed our brain with certain mechanisms that support our health and well-being, mental health and well-being. Of course, we have very different job and work environment than we had back in the day. So it's stressful work. Actually, 80% of the people in the work life is shown to report high levels of stress, work-related stress. So distance work, people are lonely. There's so many things that contributes to our stress every day.
And what do you say to those people that see stress not as a bug, but as more as a feature, and they actually use it into their work?
Yeah, I mean, when our bodies are stressed, it's not always bad. So we have eustress and we have distress. So this is the classification. And stress can be hormetic. So when it's hormetic, we say that it causes certain sort of stretch or tension in the body or some sort of inflammatory response, for example. And after that comes growth phase or recovery or repair phase. So it's very similar to exercise. You know, you go to the gym, you lift weights, your muscle gets a little bit torn, and then the muscle growth is actually the repair process. So it's good. You can use that as a fuel for a certain period of time. So we must separate acute stress and chronic stress. If you never get into the recovery and repair phase, you start causing more harm than good.
So the stress can also be expressed physically, that's what you're saying?
Stress is always linked to physiological response as well. So if we have mental distress, it's linked to certain hormones in the brain like cortisol, noradrenaline. These are stress states. And I don't think we can really separate mental and physical stress that much. Even these physiological reactions like cortisol can sometimes fuel action, like a positive action. However, we might, the mental and physical stress are linked in this way.
I heard you talked a lot about neuroplasticity. Could you dive into what that is exactly and why is it so important for mental health?
Oh, absolutely. And I think this will be more and more integrated into mental health interventions. There has been now expansive studies on the brain's ability to modify itself functionally and structurally in response to experiences like learning and deliberate action and injury even, for example. And it's linked to mental health in the sense that some of the mechanisms, biological mechanisms of neuroplasticity are linked to improvements in mental health. So, for instance, there is an area in our brain called hippocampus. And when this area is stimulated, when its functions are supported, it improves both mood in depressed patients and it improves learning and memory as well. And when we do anything like we may want to change our personality. So let's say we have high levels of anxiety linked to traumatic experiences that causes us to react to certain signals or thoughts in a negative way. And then we try to change this behavior or this emotional reaction. It requires neuroplastic mechanisms. So it requires different kind of connections to be formed in the brain in order for our brain to actually have a different kind of reaction to that thought or that event.
And how can we rewire our brains for lasting happiness and mental clarity then?
Right. So we have a lot of tools for that. I would say there are two major categories of tools. So there are cognitive and emotional tools, and there is lifestyle tools, which is sometimes referred as lifestyle medicine. So we talk about things like nutrition and exercise, for instance, and sleep. And then we have therapeutics tools. So we challenge our thinking We challenge our maladaptive beliefs, our self-limiting beliefs. We dig into our biases and try to find evidence that our biased thinking may or may not be true. So we do need to harness both emotional, cognitive, and lifestyle tools for that. And I would say, to a certain extent, the lifestyle tools comes first. And that's what I always start with. And that's because if you don't have the machinery, if you don't fuel that machinery, if your brain is not healthy, it's very difficult to induce this kind of healthy type of neuroplastic changes. In fact, you can get more stressed. You can cause maladaptive neuroplastic changes if your brain health is under risk. So I would start with the lifestyle, and then I would move to the cognitive and emotional tools.
Okay, so when it comes to fixing your mental health, you have to start through fixing your physical health to then go and rewire your mental health. That's what you're saying?
I would say starting with the physical health greatly facilitates your process if you are doing therapy, if you are doing mental exercises, because your brain is just so much more functional and ready for those changes, because you are feeding it, let's say, with proper nutrition. There are certain levels of neurotransmitters required for neuroplastic changes, like acetylcholine and dopamine and serotonin. Those are all in place. So you need to have that machinery to be able to push you forward. And also because sleep, for example, is greatly linked to physical health. If you are physically ill, sleep problems are one of the first ones to emerge. And sleep is the neuroplastic window. You can start with emotional and cognitive tools, and many people want to, and they can still work, no doubt about that. And many therapies like acceptance and commitment therapy has response rate of 70 to 80%. So you see 70 to 80% of people improving just if they start this form of therapy. But even in these therapeutic approaches, we are now emphasizing quite a lot the lifestyle aspect and the integration of the body and mind.
As a society, we're sleeping less and less, and obviously stress is at an all-time high. Do you make this correlation between stress causes lack of sleep? And do you see that as a vicious cycle where lack of sleep causes stress, and then stress causes lack of sleep?
Absolutely, you're so right about that. So we have many studies showing that when we don't get enough sleep, especially REM sleep, our brain's amygdala, it's often referred as the fear center, but it's very much involved in all emotions, that gets hyper alert. So you become more reactive to stimuli. So let's say you're in a traffic, okay? You're in a traffic and someone makes a mistake there and it causes a hassle. So you get more angry about that if you haven't slept the night before well. Or whatever emotional stressor, there might be a nasty comment from someone or whatever it is, you spill coffee. So you get more stressed if you haven't slept the night before. And there are many, many studies showing this. We can see that in brain scans. And there is an excellent book by Dr. Matthew Walker, who is a neuroscientist, called Why We Sleep, where he clearly outlines the importance of sleep for our brains and for our emotional balance. So if anyone's interested to really, really dig deep into this topic, that book is I think the best in the world to really get understanding on this.
Amazing. Can you share some practical techniques you may use to promote daily brain rewiring?
Absolutely. Oh my God, there is so many actually. And I love that you post these questions because this is not that much talked about and there is so much potential with okay, let's start with one of my favorite ones, which is just boosting brain growth factors. So brain growth factors are known to be important for synaptic density and improving synaptic growth. So synapses are basically where the neurons wire. You have synaptic connections in your brain. All brain cells are connected through synapses. And the more you get growth to their dendrites, so this kind of connective branches in the synapses, the more you get, growth in the neuronal synapses, you get potential for neuroplasticity. And brain growth factors are linked to this. So one excellent way to boost synaptic growth and brain growth factors, namely BDNF, is high intensity exercise, where you increase your muscle lactate. And increasing lactate levels, so going over your aerobic threshold, is going to increase your BDNF production in the brain. And this is there was a paper that came out, I think 2023, that showed that just 6 minutes of high intensity exercise in a fasted state, so without eating, boosted brain growth factor by 250%. And this was comparing to 30 minutes of static bike ride. So that boosted only a little bit. So actually this kind of 6 minutes of high intensity exercise boosted brain growth factors 5 times more than having been eaten and exercising like in a low intensity level. So high intensity exercise. Yeah, exercise is one of the best, I think one of the most underutilized ways of boosting brain health. There is so much exercise is always talked about in the context of preserving muscle mass, or even increasing muscle mass, or supporting fat loss or fitness. But we can also see that, for example, resistance training, so just lifting weights at the gym, causes nice structural changes in your brain's prefrontal cortex, which is important for emotional management, and it's an anti-anxiety mechanism. So studies show that if you suffer from anxiety, then resistance training can reduce those levels of anxiety. And this is all, explained by the mechanisms of neuroplasticity.
And is there a minimum threshold to limit anxiety? Like how long should you work out?
So I think just meeting the exercise recommendations is gonna be like very powerful. So it's like if you exercise, for example, 3 hours a week, that should be enough for most of the people to meet like 150 to 300 minutes of moderate intensity activity. And I would include definitely 2 to 3 resistance training sessions per week. And they don't have to be long, they don't have to be super hard. Even like single burst of exercise has shown to cause elevation in the brain growth hormones.
And what would you qualify in the previous study as a high intensity workout or exercise? Do you consider that sprinting or just to work out till failure?
Yeah. So you don't have to go to failure for sure. I would say you will start feeling the lactate at one point when you get exhausted, when you feel like you get a little bit of muscle burn or this kind of tingling in the muscles, and you start getting a little bit out of breath, but not too much so that you couldn't speak.
And can you get there in 6 minutes?
Yeah. So what I do is I use treadmill, or I do just jumping jacks or burpees or something like that. You can definitely get there in 6 minutes.
Okay, I have to try that out.
Yeah.
Okay, so working out, what other practical techniques do you have?
Meditation is a great way. It takes a little bit longer. Most people find it boring or difficult, which is a good thing, because whenever your brain is under discomfort, it has a potential to change. Actually, just being uncomfortable in a good way, like through deliberate practice, is quite powerful for our brain. So I would say meditation is an amazing tool for doing that. and then diet and sleep.
Okay. And when it comes to meditation, do you talk about breath work, or what kinds of meditation would you use, and for how long?
Right. So there are different ways to think about meditation. It kind of depends on what you want to work on. So when we talk about mental health, it depends a little bit about, do you feel anxious? Do you feel depressed? Do you feel like your nervous system is just over alert, or do you feel like you need more stimulation to your nervous system? So, for example, anxiety is characterized often by tension and distress. So, in anxiety, in some forms of meditation can be more effective. For example, loving kindness meditation, which is repeating affirmations about well-being and health. So it's a Buddhist practice. Originally, it's now studied in the science of meditation, and there are great papers on how it affects heart rate variability, inflammatory markers, cortisol, and well-being in people. So it's just where you sit down and you kind of repeat these phrases, may I be well, may I be happy, and you think about people that you love and you repeat the same phrases. So that's one form that I think is very useful. Mindfulness meditation, which utilizes the power of diffusion. So you sit with any experience that arises. It's you harness your power, mind's power, to just observe things that happen. And often this is what prevents us being happy, because we think that whenever we are uncomfortable or we feel pain or we feel distress, we must react. Whereas sometimes the best reaction is just, I would say, not caring, but it's not caring, it's just not being reactive. You respond to the emotion by deciding that it's okay to feel this way. And mindfulness teaches us just that you won't go into panicking when you feel a little bit of pain or discomfort. It's very powerful. It's part of acceptance and commitment therapy and mindfulness-based stress reduction, which are both clinically used tools for anxiety and distress. And you can find, like, mindfulness meditation is all over the internet. You can find YouTube meditations, you can use apps like, exactly. You have Calm, you have Headspace, you have Sam Harris's app, many different types of apps. Then there is something that's called focused attention meditation, which is like an intersection between breath work and meditation. So you calm down your breathing and you start focusing on your breathing. So for example, you may count breaths if you want, or then you may not. So you breathe in for 4 breaths, hold for 2, breathe out for 4. Breathing. You can do box breathing, yeah, or you can do just like counting the breathing, and you just pay attention. And every time your thought wanders, you will just bring them back. Just bring them back. And this activates a system in the brain. This activates your dorsolateral prefrontal cortex. Again, the prefrontal cortex here right below, behind your forehead is the area of executive control. And when you activate the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex and you bring your focus back on where you want it to do, that's the rep. So people often think that I lost my focus, so I failed. But that's actually the rep. So I lost my focus and I brought it back.
It's like in the gym, you just do 1 rep, 2 reps, and you're just trying to do as many as possible until you don't need to do the reps anymore, and you're just concentrated.
Exactly. That's
exactly.
The thing.
You mentioned nutrition. What's the impact of nutrition on our brain health and mental well-being?
Huge. Everything. I mean, where shall we start? Nutrients are what makes neurotransmitters. Nutrients are what creates brain structure. Nutrients are what lowers brain inflammation. Nutrients are everything for your brain. You can break or make your brain with nutrients. And I don't think there is a single person who can deny that some dietary intervention or difference in the diet that they've made did not change anything in their mood or in their mental energy. And it's all very clearly explained that by the fact that, they are the building blocks and the structural parts of the brain. And there are these inflammatory agents in the nutrients, mainly sugar, ultra-processed foods, some artificial chemicals that just cause an unwanted reaction in the body and in the brain. So they technically increase your stress levels, they increase inflammation in the body, and that will alert the brain and increase stress in the brain.
Yeah, you are what you eat. I've been talking about this for a while now on the podcast.
Yeah.
So just food is just so important for your overall well-being and your overall mental health. It just links back to everything. Just if you have a crappy diet, you're just gonna feel crap. You're gonna have brain fog, and you're gonna not want to do blah blah blah. It's just so important, and a lot of people are in denial when it comes to their food. They just don't want it to be the answer. They're like, no, it can't be the food. Well, it is. Honestly, just go on a good diet, and you'll see all the good benefits it does for you.
So here's an interesting fact that shows the power of nutrition. So about somewhere 200 million years ago, the human size increased exponentially. It is this gradually or exponentially increasing curve. And of course, we're interested in what happened to our brain. Why did that period of time allow our brain to grow massively in size, like the brain tripled in size, and allowed our prefrontal cortex to develop? And that's believed to be the reason for why our species developed, why the intellectual human being developed, because we are very unique as a species in terms of our brain structure. So there is no other animal that can do things that we can do. And so I mean, like, in terms of how we can use our language, how we can study our brain, how we the prefrontal structure in humans is very unique. So what is explaining this? And there is quite a lot of evidence. There was just a recent article in the annual reviews of nutrition, which is one of the highest quality of evidence that looks at plenty of data and then combines them and say that this is the view that we are currently believing to be true. And that article discussed on how in the time, so there was before Homo sapiens, we had Homo erectus, and the Homo erectus species started developing cooking methods and hunting gear. So they had access to meat, and they started cooking to meat, and they started cooking vegetables as well. So we got a lot more key nutrients that we now know are linked to brain development, such as DHA, which is found in fish, for example. Plenty of DHA is found in fish and seaweed. We got access to higher amounts of protein sources, so animal meat, so iron, folate, B12. All those things are known to be crucial for brain development. Choline, absolutely important for the white matter for the brain. So it's undeniable in the science. Even we have randomized controlled trials that show that when you do a nutritional intervention, some aspects of cognition change. So nutrition it's established. We cannot deny it anymore.
Yeah, completely. And those that do are foolish in a way. Yeah, and what are some of the specific foods and supplements you recommend for improving this mental health?
For mental health, so I would start with reducing what's not supporting your brain. I think Dr. Daniel Amen, who is a very well-known psychiatrist, he said that choose the foods that love you back. so foods that, it's I think that captures a lot of what we are missing at the moment in nutrition when we think like, should I eat this? Should I eat that? Should I restrict this? Or should I not eat milk or grains or whatever? The point is that we are just getting in so much food. Majority of the people statistically are getting in so much food that are not loving them back, that they are causing this chronic inflammation and chronic stress and chronic metabolic disturbance in their bodies. And then just adding on foods on top of that may not help. You need to first like calm down the inflammation and calm down, kind of like get your metabolism working in a good way, and then think about the nutrients. Of course, just adding in nutrients also helps. So I would say high amounts of sugar are destroying the brain. There's no doubt about it. There is so many inflammatory agents that we know that even through insulin resistance, that can happen in the brain.
And is that refined sugars, or is that also natural sugars like carbs?
Yeah. So it's debatable. I'm looking at the totality of evidence. We have quite good knowledge that refined sugars, refined carbs, so white bread, highly ultra-processed stuff, is definitely bad for the brain. Is definitely contributing to metabolic disorder and potentially increasing the risk of brain aging and Alzheimer's and mood disorders. However, based on what I've learned, and I have looked at so many different diets and so many different studies and discussed with so many different experts, I feel like there is quite a big individual variability in who can eat or tolerate carbs from fruits and vegetables. So I feel like for a general healthy population, the meta-analysis and studies like that show that definitely it's linked to better health. But then there seems to be a certain groups of people who have maybe an autoimmune disorder, who have maybe some sort of a lot of allergies, may have a neurological condition or a condition characterized by brain inflammation, who seem to benefit of cutting some fruits and vegetables. But I wouldn't say it necessarily relates to the fact that human body couldn't tolerate those in general. So this is where we get into the individual factors.
Yeah, that's super interesting.
Based on the studies, we know that for the brain, what is linked to better brain health and longevity in the brain and better mental health often comes up as a Mediterranean diet, which is kind of high in vegetables and in fruits and in berries. And we know there are many phytochemicals in these foods that are contributing to brain health. But then I know many cases in which zero carb or even a ketogenic diet is going to be better for their brain health. So for example, we know that in epilepsy, ketogenic diet has 50% response rate. So 50% of the patients who eat ketogenic diet who have epilepsy improve their symptoms. Ketogenic diet, for those who don't know, it's high fat, very low carb diet. So this is because there is certain characteristics in their nervous system that makes their brain more reactive. And then there is this imbalance of certain neurotransmitters. And by just reducing all the carbs, it seems to be very helpful for that brain type.
Okay. And what other foods then would you recommend?
I think everyone will benefit from protein. So protein, the more I like study
animal
nutrition.
Animal protein over plant protein, or is there no differentiation?
So I would say amino acids are the key. So again, we like the dogmatism. For me, it's not that helpful idea when we are actually dealing with people. It's more like, what can your body digest? So when we talk about mental health, there are many people who have certain, so usually chronic diseases are linked to mental health decline. Many people with mental health issues can suffer from things like diabetes or IBS, which is an inflammatory bowel syndrome, which is a inflammation in the gut. And then digesting plant protein like beans and legumes is very difficult. So animal protein is usually more easier to digest. But there are people who have like super stomachs. Like my husband can eat any form of protein whatsoever. He can eat a bowl of beans and no issues. Like it's all related to the condition of the gut and how your body can digest these things. But I think for majority of the people, animal protein, it's kind of labeled now as a bad and everyone should reduce their red meat consumption. But I think red meat actually provides so many important nutrients for the brain. And it's absolutely nutrient dense. It's easy to digest. And if you want to focus on the brain health aspect, then you get a lot of that stuff that your brain needs. So you get iron, you get folate, you get vitamin B, you get choline. If you eat salmon, you get DHA. So I personally, and this is of course just anecdotal for me, but I know many people who have done the same and reported the same results. I have been on a very restrictive vegetarian diet where I didn't eat any animal protein and I felt absolutely horrible and brain fogged all the time. So I was with that diet maybe 6 months, and this was over 10 years ago. And I couldn't cope because... So that was the period of my life when I started first getting interested in diets. And I was reading so much about like the healing power of plants. And that was the time as well in the history where we started getting this research on, and I guess governmental recommendations that everyone should decrease their meat consumption. So I wasn't yet studying psychology at the time. And I wasn't yet digging into the research that much. It was more about self-experiments. And I went to the diet and I just felt horrible. My migraines flared up. I didn't have power to exercise. I know some people thrive with this diet, but wasn't for me for sure. And then I moved, so I have experimented with different types of diet, including ketogenic diet, Mediterranean diet, and most recently, animal-based diet. And for me, dramatically increasing my meat consumption actually fixed a lot of brain fog and a lot of allergy symptoms that I was getting from foods.
That's interesting. I think everybody, as you said, no one diet is going to fit everybody. So I think everybody should just try and experiment for themselves, like you have and many others have too, and just see what works for them.
Yeah, and I must say that focusing on the nutrients, I think, is a very practical, very logical approach, very safe approach. So not going so much into dogmatism and thinking that, okay, I'm going to become a ketogenic or carnivore right now and I will never touch a broccoli again, or I will consider myself a failure. But rather thinking like, okay, am I meeting my daily standards for the brain vitamins that I need? Am I getting enough omega-3 fatty acids? And one of the simplest, very easy way to know are you meeting your standards is to go to take lab tests.
Mm-hmm. Like regular checkups.
Yeah, regular checkups, vitamins, minerals. There are many labs that provide walk-in lab services, at least here in Europe. You don't need a prescription. You just walk in, you say, I want this lab, this lab, this lab, and you test your levels. And then you know, if you see that, oh, I'm very low in iron and ferritin, and these are very important for brain health. So maybe I increase a little bit of my animal protein consumption to get these from my diet. And I always would go diet-first approach before supplements, just because supplementing can also cause imbalances. So say you start an iron supplement that actually can lower your levels of chromium, which is important for your skin health. So there is like tweaking with supplements can be sometimes a bit harmful.
So you're saying to move our focus from the food and the calories to more of a nutrients-focused diet.
Absolutely.
Okay, and it's interesting what you just said about the supplements. I definitely think we should find the nutrients straight into our food and then take supplements as a last resort of I can't fit it in today, or it's just maybe not in the budget. So if people didn't have the time or the budget for certain nutrients or supplements, what supplements would you recommend as a top priority?
So what many people don't need, what many people don't meet, the daily requirements, what many people does need is omega-3 fatty acids, so DHA. And I haven't met a single person who eats 80 grams of fatty fish every day yet. And that's when you meet your daily needs for DHA. And I think now we can see more and more data on how omega-3 fatty acids are extremely important for brain. Actually, DHA is one of the structural components of your brain cells. 70% of your brain cell membrane is DHA. And it's known that children who lack DHA when they grow up, their brain development is lower, and it's even linked to mental distress and certain mental retardation in some cases, some nutritional deficiencies. So omega-3 fatty acid. Most people, it depends when you live, but where you live, but here in the Nordics, in wintertime, most people are not meeting vitamin D levels.
Yes. Yeah, completely agree.
Yeah, and so you do at the UK as well. I have checked the stats. Most people are not, even when they spend the 15 minutes. Sun. Yeah, even when I actually lived in Aberdeen for 4 years. Okay. Yeah, and there wasn't that much sun in the wintertime. Or there was sun, but nobody wanted to go out.
There's so much sun.
There were clouds, and even when there was sun, I didn't want to go out because it was usually raining sideways in Aberdeen, as you know. That's the most common weather there. So definitely vitamin D. And what I would do, I would definitely get it measured first. So if you start overeating vitamin D, that can be also harmful. Vitamin D requires K. So there are great supplements called vitamin D plus K. So I would get those, and I would get something that's in fat. So there are MCT-based vitamin D or olive oil-based vitamin D, just because that's a fat-soluble vitamin. So you ensure that there is a good bioavailability when you have it in the fat. Those are kind of the key that I would supplement. Yeah, so I wouldn't say that you need to start supplementing for the sake of it, but those are just the things that most people don't meet. And if you have stress, if you have mental symptoms, most people are deficient in electrolytes. So magnesium and potassium and even sodium in some cases, depending on the diet. But let's say if you drink coffee, you are depleted in electrolytes, like coffee depletes electrolytes, exercise does this, sauna does this, stress depletes electrolytes. And magnesium, many people know it as for the muscles, good for the muscles. It does reduce muscle tension, and studies show this, but it's also absolutely crucial for balancing neurotransmitters. And balancing...
So you need to find a balance in that.
Yeah. So, okay. I think for most people, a good experiment that you can do if you are depleted in electrolytes, because they're a bit hard to measure if you have that electrolyte balance, is just to buy an electrolyte powder, put it in your glass of water, and drink that in a few days and see if you see changes. Most people that I know I use electrolytes every day. Most people that I've spoken to that have started using electrolytes definitely have always seen improvements.
And I know the general public usually love their multivitamins with A, B, even C. You wouldn't recommend having those as often as recommended, or not?
I don't see a reason if you don't have deficiencies.
Yeah, if you find it in your food and you've got a good diet, there's no point of.
If your diet is correct, I don't think people need multivitamins, because you often don't know what levels are you getting, or do you even need that, especially if you haven't measured. I mean, of course, if you go to measure your labs and you're deficient in all vitamins and you don't want to change your diet, yes, you don't want to change your diet, take multivitamin.
Amazing. Would you also argue that yoga could also be a form of meditation and exercise?
Yes, absolutely. So there is an interesting study and interesting new science about how balance exercises have a great potential to improve, for example, attention. So it's quite a preliminary, but that's just how our brain's balance areas are linked to our dopamine centers and our prefrontal cortex. And the vast majority of the studies that I've looked in with yoga is that they show that they reduce work-related stress. They actually can prevent it. So it's even like a preventive method to reduce work-related stress. It can support neuroplasticity because you're doing a lot of muscle-brain sort of connective movements. So you improve your brain-muscle connection. And it requires a lot of focus. It requires utilization of your breathing. So you are training your nervous system at the same time. And it's movement. Every movement, I would say, if you like yoga and that's how you get your exercise, it's amazing. I mean, I used yoga I've done it for 15 years, and it's one of the best things I know for brain health.
And my last question is, how can we prevent burnouts and maintain high energy levels in our daily lives?
Good question. Excellent question. So for burnout, it's usually prevention is the best action. So learn about stress, learn about how to balance stress. I would say the most effective ways that you can use is good nutrition, exercise, and just making sure that you have these like cognitive breaks or little breaks in your day. So you could have just 5-10 minutes meditation, or just 5-10 minutes, 15 minutes relaxation somewhere in the afternoon, and use that to rebalance your neurotransmitters, because that's an effective way to calm your nervous system. So what many people do is that when they get that afternoon brain fog or dip in the energy, they take more coffee. But the problem at that point in your nervous system, if you're feeling stressed and fatigued for that reason, is actually not that you are understimulated, it's that you are overreaching. And that's when you need to recover for a bit so you can get stimulated again. So monitoring the body is one of the best ways to prevent burnout. And I think like measuring heart rate variability and just increasing that self-awareness of
with like a smartwatch or with a Whoop.
Yeah, so I use Aura and Ultra Human, or you can use Polar, Bluetooth, but also you can check your heart rate, and you can use, if you don't want to measure, you just need to take a mindful moment and listen to your body, go into meditation and start like observing your body and how do you feel. That's usually a great indication on and give insights on what we should do at that point.
Amazing. So basically watch this episode and you'll be all set.
Yes.